10 a.m. today. So please ask your friends to come and join for ROF today at 10 a.m.
There will be postgraduate students as well, right?
Yes, Doctor.
Ya, betul. Hai, selamat pagi. Selamat datang ke ROF. Untuk hari ini 28 Mei. Bersama kita adalah Dr. Hadi yang akan menjadi pembentang pada hari ini. So, kita akan start sesi pada pukul 10 pagi sebentar lagi. Dan minta rakan-rakan untuk boleh wawarkan kepada rakan-rakan yang lain untuk sama-sama join sesi ROF pagi ini. Welcome to ROF, everyone. We will start a few minutes left. The CPD and CST will be send the link before end of this ROF. So stay tuned and jangan ke mana-mana. Kekalkan kedudukan anda sehingga habis ROF ini. Okay, Assalamualaikum and very good morning to everyone. I think we can start the RF hari ini. So thank you very much for your time and effort to join the RF today. I'm Dr. Siti Suhaili, the host for RF as usual. So untuk hari ini kita bersama dengan presenter yang lain untuk membentangkan tajuk pendidikan beliau yang lain dalam bidang yang lain juga. Dan kali ini kita bawakan khas daripada drama dan teater untuk membincangkan topik pendidikan yang berkaitan dengan bidang tersebut. Suka saya nak maklumkan bahawa untuk para pelajar dan staf boleh anda dapatkan markas CPD dan CST sebelum habis sesi ROF. Kami akan hantarkan sesi link di dalam ruangan chat dan boleh isikan untuk mengumpul markas CPD anda. Saya ucapkan terima kasih, welcome kepada semua pendengar, penonton sama ada dari USM dan juga saya turut dimaklumkan bahawa terdapat juga penonton daripada luar. Dan saya ucapkan berbanyak terima kasih. Anda juga boleh melihat dan menyertai sesi ROF ini sama ada secara live di SB ataupun di dalam ruangan Cisco Webex. Jadi bersama kita hari ini seorang pembentang, the presenter yang agak boleh saya sebut agak dikenali dalam bidang performance arts di Malaysia, Dr. Profesor Madya Dr. A.S. Hadi Shafii. Saya seorang pensyarah di Pusat Pengajian Seni University Sains Malaysia. Beliau merupakan, saya akan bacakan sedikit biografi tentang beliau yang merupakan pensyarah di Pusat Pengajian Seni University Sains Malaysia. Beliau merupakan mantan pengarah Dewan Budaya dan juga mantan dekan Pusat Pengajian Seni. Sedikit biodata beliau, merupakan seorang menghabiskan pengajian dalam bidang seni persembahan di University of London pada tahun 2004 tak silap saya, pada tahun 1995, dan habiskan PhD di School of the Arts Indonesia and Malaysia pada tahun 2004. Sedikit bidang penyelidikan yang beliau mempunyai banyak kepakaran di situ adalah lebih kepada theater, director dan juga beberapa genre theater yang dihasilkan sepanjang beliau berkhidmat di University Sains Malaysia. Dan saya lihat di dalam bidang beliau banyak lebih kepada seni makyung, mendekatkan diri kepada research dan pendidikan susul galung makyung dan tarian di Malaysia dan di Southeast Asia, antaranya di Indonesia, Malaysia dan Thailand. Beliau juga mempunyai pengalaman dalam pelbagai khusus di dalam pelbagai bidang pengarahan drama dan pementasan, sama ada di dalam Malaysia dan di luar. Antaranya sebagai contoh Makyung Titis Sakti, Reflection on Malay Traditional Performance, Culture and the Malay Worldview Through an Adaptation of Shakespeare. Dan selain itu beliau juga banyak membuat jalinan kolaborasi di dalam dan di luar Malaysia seperti UNESCO, APB, Asia Pacific Bond, Theatre School Directors, Conference and Festival, dan juga The Sound of Silence, Lasalle College of the Arts Singapore, dan juga di National School of Drama, New Delhi, India. Saya difahamkan beliau telah pun pernah mendapat tawaran sebagai research fellow di University of Minnesota, USA pada tahun 2018, dan bidang-bidang kursus yang diajar oleh beliau di School of the Arts meliputi kursus-kursus daripada tahun 1 hinggalah kepada final year students seperti Introduction to Drama and Theatre, Fundamentals Acting, Oral Skill for TESOL, Intermediate Directing, Research Methodology, History of Western Theatre, Thinking Techniques, Advanced Acting, dan juga turut mengajar di bidang research methodology dan studio practice. Kalau nak diikutkan dalam CV yang beliau berikan, sangat banyak dan sangat panjang untuk saya bacakan, tapi sehari ini saya hanya boleh highlight kepada yang penting dan untuk semua boleh faham secara general tentang siapakah Dr. Hadi Shafii. So untuk hari ini saya tak nak mengulas lanjut. Kita akan minta Dr. Hadi Shafii untuk memulakan pembentangan beliau yang bertajuk Locating the Contemporary Identity of Makyung, Integrating the Localisation of Performance in the Sea Region. So Dr. Hadi, bersedia ke? Mungkin dah bersedia dari semalam. Okay. So selalunya kita akan beri masa 1 jam lah, dan 1 jam ekstra plus jika ada Q&A. Jadi kita sediakan sesi untuk Q&A di hujung program ini, tetapi anda juga boleh mengatakan sebarang soalan di dalam ruangan chat dan di dalam ruangan FB Live. So jika Dr. Hadi dah bersedia, kita boleh minta Dr. Hadi untuk membuat pembentangan sekarang. Silakan Dr. Hadi.
Alright, thank you so much Dr. Siti Suhaili. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can you hear me?
Yes.
I hope you can. Yeah, okay, alright. Assalamualaikum and a very good morning to everybody who are here today for our ROF research on Friday this morning. Before I begin my talk today, I would like to thank School of the Arts, our Dean, Dr. Mumtaz and Dr. Sarina also as the organizer, the Deputy Dean of Research and Postgraduate Studies, and also to our moderator today, Dr. Siti Sohaili. Thank you so much for the sweet introduction about myself. I know I think my introduction, my biography is probably quite long. So I'm actually very grateful to be here today to talk about and share about the performance of Makyung, the research about Makyung, not only in Malaysia but also in the other countries such as Indonesia and also in Thailand. So the title of the research is Locating the Contemporary Identity of Makyung, Interrogating the Localization as Performance in the Southeast Asian Region. I don't know why I can't. Okay, right. This is basically a research university grant from USM. So I would like to thank University of Science of Malaysia for this grant, for accepting the proposal under the cluster of social science and arts, and the duration is for 3 years. And apart from myself, the co-researchers are Professor Dr. Tan Soo Beng from School of the Arts, USM. I think she's still here at our school. She's also my guru. She's also my gamelan guru. And also my colleague, Dr. Johan Awang Othman from School of the Arts, and he is from the music department. And also my friend, my very close friend, and also our graduate assistant at the time, Rosnan Abdul Rahman, who is now currently the director of JKKN Kelantan. Okay, allow me to give a little background about Makyung. For those who are not very familiar with Makyung. So Makyung is a form of Malay traditional theatre and encompasses philosophical elements, stereotype characters, acting, and movement stylization, songs, and instrumental music. It is believed that Makyung performance had actually developed and flourished in the 16th century in the area of Patani, actually Thailand, and slowly to Kelantan and Terengganu in Malaysia. Makyung was a very popular entertainment in the palace among the queens of Patani, such as Raja Hijau, Raja Biru, Raja Ungu, and Raja Kuning, who ruled during the period of, from 1585 to 1680. And Makyung, as I think most of us know, was actually the first and not actually the first, now the first and only treasure of the Malaysia's traditional Malay theatre to gain recognition by UNESCO under the masterpiece of the Oral and Intangible Heritage of Humanity category, and accorded a status on the 25th of November 2005. And Makyung was actually recognized based on the concept of the performance and its theatrical conventions in terms of acting, dance, movement, music, embroidered with philosophy, as well as an adventure for human being to be a wise and a responsible person in this world. A little bit about the research background. About the existing studies regarding Makyung comprise debates regarding its origins, the differences in the dramatic and musical presentation, and also the various styles of the Makyung performance in Thailand, Indonesia, and Malaysia. Nevertheless, these discourses do not look at how the Makyung has adapted to local cultures and developed its own identities in the various regions, or how the form can be contemporarized in order to be sustainable. So you must have also a basic interest in the development process in the Makyung as critical aspects of Malay heritage and culture. Hence, this research aims to examine the local identities of Makyung and how the form has incorporated local elements in 3 different locations in Southeast Asia, that is Kelantan, or also Terengganu, Riau in Indonesia, and also in Yala, Patani, Thailand. So basically, this research is not to actually compare which one is the right one or not. It's just actually to look at the local style and how the locals adapt to the Makyung performance. So through in-depth oral interviews with veteran performers, participant observation and recordings of performances in these 3 locations, we intend to examine the 3 forms as to how they have localized and changed through time. For this, we investigate the origins, structures, the movements, ensemble, the music, and hence why Dr. Johan also is one of the researchers here, because he's the expert from the music department to the singing styles, and also stories or the repertoire of the Makyung in the 3 areas of study. So hopefully the outcome includes a conceptual framework to look at how Makyung has developed and localized across borders and link to the shared Malay heritage of the Nusantara. So for the problem statement, Makyung was recognized, as I've mentioned before, by UNESCO in 2005. So even though UNESCO has endorsed Makyung as a Malay heritage, however, this claim has not been formally substantiated. As such, to date, what comprises Makyung and where the form originated are still being debated by scholars and practitioners. For example, the nature of the Makyung performance in Thailand and Riau, Indonesia, is different in terms of its dramatic presentations and musical styles. And even in Malaysia, sometimes people think there are some veteran performers believe that Makyung is actually from Terengganu, and some actually considered Makyung from Kelantan, and some also say that no, it's actually from Patani. So we are not going to go in depth into that. So basically, we are just want to talk about the in terms of the performance about Makyung in Southeast Asia. So according to Sumantri Sastro Suwondo, in Makyung Riau, the actors are wearing masks, and this is actually quite different compared to Makyung in Malaysia, and other dramatic elements such as the repertoire, dance, movement, gesture, musical instruments, songs, the language as well, and costume illustrate various forms and techniques, and as sequence contribute towards some confusion regarding Makyung's origin, because in Makyung Riau, they don't speak in Kelantanese dialect. They speak in the Riau dialect. They actually speak in Malay, not in Kelantanese. Hence, there is no substantial evidence to formally address the problem to where Makyung came from. So this information will provide a basis to the argument of the ministry and maybe UNESCO regarding the origins of Makyung and how it's actually spread to other regions. The objectives of this research basically to investigate the contemporaries identity and characteristics of Makyung performance in 3 different locations in Southeast Asia, basically Kelantan, mostly in Kelantan, in Tanjung Pinang, or maybe mostly in Riau, Indonesia, and Yala in Patani, and also to examine issues regarding the development of the Makyung performance in the 3 localities from its earliest conception until the present day, and finally, hopefully, to develop a new conceptual framework for the study of the various factors influencing the development of Makyung in the Nusantara based on oral interviews with veteran performers and observations of the current practices in the 3 locations. So a little bit on the description of the methodology. The method employed for this research involved mainly qualitative analysis and ethnographic research designed through obviously observations and semi-structured interviews, or sometimes unstructured interviews is appropriated, that focuses on the performance and cultural aspects, particularly on issues relating to the identity. So the first stage of the research involves the literature review, designing the questionnaire, as well as discussing about the current issues on Makyung and its practice at these 3 locations, in Southeast Asia, basically in Kota Baru, Malaysia, and Yala in Thailand, and Riau, Indonesia. So the issues of hybridization and cultural adaptation will be discussed at length to identify the similarities and differences in Makyung in regards to these locations. So the second phase of the research of the study is the fieldwork, where the researchers are going to observe and interview the performers, managers, and audience in regards to Makyung repertoire, the training system, performance structure, musical instruments, songs and dances, costume, props, makeup, staging, management, as well as the opening and closing rituals. And we actually are also quite lucky. Actually, this research was actually started before the COVID-19. Yeah. But along the way, as you all know, then the pandemic of COVID-19 came in at around last year. So we couldn't, because we all have to stay at home, and we can't go to our second phase for our second interview. So it was actually quite unfortunate that we can't go to do our further research. But basically, we actually managed to go to Yala and also to Riau. And the third phase of the study is to study, analyze all the data which were observed and interviewed at these three locations. And the findings will again be analyzed to determine the elements that influence the style of the performance at each location. And finally, hopefully, based on the findings, the research team will inform related bodies in regards to the origin of Makyung performance, and hopefully one day to propose a contemporary performance of Makyung which embedded hybridization of Nusantara cultural elements of Makyung. So in terms of when we talk about the performance, we cannot run away from Richard Schechner, the selected materials on performance theory. In 1977, he said, performance is an inclusive term. Theatre is only note on a continuum that reaches from the ritualizations of animals, humans, to performances in everyday life. So performance is not only about a theatre performance. It's the performance can be rites or ceremonies. Shamanism is also considered as performance. Eruption and resolution of crisis also is considered as performance. Performance in everyday life, sports, even entertainment is actually considered as performance. Play, art making process, and also ritualization, and that's checked now. And also, according to Irving Goffman in 1956, in his book, The Presentation of Self in Everyday Life, Goffman's analysis lies in this relationship between performance and life. He developed this dramaturgical analysis wherein he observes a connection between the kinds of acts that people put on in their daily life and theatrical performances. So, as we all know, they are what actually constitute about performance elements. We are actually looking at the concept of the performance, the structure in terms of the performance structure, the music, of course, the musician, the costume, props, the acting style, the dance, the repertoire of the performance of Makyung. So these are the elements of the performance that we are actually looking at. So this is the flow chart. I'm probably not going to go deeper into that because of the whole thing that I've mentioned earlier. We collect and analyze the historical records, academic, and then after that our fieldwork to Kota Baru, and then after that to Yala, and then we managed to go to Riau. I myself with Dr. Johan and also with Rosnan Rahman went to Riau to observe the performance for the very first time actually. But then for the second performance, Prof. Tan went to supposedly to Riau, but something happened. As we all know, her mom at the time was not well, so she couldn't make it to go to the Riau, so she had to come back to Penang, and also at that time, because because of the budget constraint, we cannot, all of us cannot go in one go and for the second time. So unfortunately, Prof. Tan had to actually come back to Penang. And finally, maybe the fieldwork for confirm again. This is actually the second phase. So we're supposed to go back again. Actually, supposed to go back again to Riau and also to Thailand. But because of the COVID-19, unfortunately, because of the nature of this research, actually we're supposed to go there because we're supposed to stay at home, and I think it's very risky. It's very dangerous to go. And the border was not open, so we couldn't manage to go there for our second field research. And hopefully, after we analyze the data and interpret find the findings, we may come up with a new framework for policy making, and of course, obviously, publish conference proceedings and publish articles, and also writing research report. So let me also, for those who are not very familiar with the Makyung, the etymology of Makyung. So the etymology of Makyung has been debated for many years, where the Makyung comes from, so Makyung actually has no indication of gender in terms of the performance. That is, when you talk about Makyung, you always say the Ma is actually considered as a woman, as a mother. So when we actually interview with a veteran performers, they agreed that Makyung has no indication of gender in terms of performance. It doesn't mean that Ma is actually has to be a woman performance. Ma doesn't mean that it's a mother. So the Makyung actually has no indication of gender in terms of the performance. So the etymology of Ma is not to be translated or understood literally as a mother in the Malay language. So based on various interviews with practitioners of Makyung, Ma should be understood as the main or the intentioned. Similarly, as we all know, the usage of the Malay words such as Ibu Pejabat, the Ibu Pejabat, the Ibu Kota, the Ibu Negeri, and so forth. So many scholars are also mentioned that the word of Yung is associated or derived from the word of Hyang, or known as Kayangan. As we all know here, Hyang, for instance, Sang Hyang is always related to the god. So similarly, the word of Sembahyang, meaning to sembah. Sembah is actually worship, so was to worship the god. So the Makyung is actually about the whole performance is all about it's about we actually worship to the god. So therefore, Makyung is associated as an act of acknowledging the existence of God. And we as a human being must worship to our mighty God, and this world just a platform for all of us as an adventure to be a humble and good human being to our relationship with human beings and the universe. So this was one of the just the pictures that share with you one of the performance that we recorded. I think this was way back in I can't remember. This was in the Tanjung Pura sub 2 way back in early 2000, where we can see the great prima donna hit there. Kak Asma was the Raja, and Rosnan at the back there. It's one of the performers performed in Tanjung Pura sub 2 in Terengganu. So in terms of localization, traditional art form plays a very important role in the integration of culture and sustenance of ethnic identity. We celebrate and practice the arts because it reflects our culture. So it's actually way of life, our mind, our body and soul. So art is actually very dynamic. It's actually very flexible and adaptable to the wave of change in the socio-economic and political environment. So therefore, localization of the arts is a normal cultural process and should be understood as an expression of appreciation and reflection of local communities with their own local identity or flavor. So Localization here meaning that we acknowledge the local culture, how they actually embrace the performance of Makyung, whereby in Riau, in also in Yala. So the performance of Makyung has always been associated with the Malay cultural heritage. Nevertheless, this heritage, along with other aspects of Malay culture, also need to be acknowledged as a product of centuries of developed by way of integration with various cultural elements, according to Federspiel in 1979. According to Mazna Muhammad and Syed Muhammad Al-Junid in 2013, the development and localization process is a universal process, but the recognition of its validity would depend on available records and the political agendas of the nation states. And lastly, also said, in this context, the development through integration is a cross between two separate races or culture. By examining the localness in terms of the aesthetics and characteristics of the three potential sources of Makyung theatre forms, it is possible to determine that Makyung is closely linked to the Malay culture of the Nusantara. We intend to show that although the nature of the Makyung theatre in the context of its varying integration is diverse, however, the essence and origins of Makyung theatre allude to the Malay culture. So we go back to our research questions, how the identities and local characteristics of the Makyung performance in these three locations, and how did the development and localizing process occur in the different regions, and how is it possible to conceptualize a conceptual framework on the origins and development of Makyung based on oral interviews and observations of the current practices in those three locations. And the objectives obviously to investigate the contemporaries identity and characteristics of Makyung performance in these three locations, to examine issues regarding the development and localization of the Makyung performance in the three localities, and finally, hopefully, develop a conceptual framework for the study of the various factors influencing the development and localization of Makyung in the Nusantara based on the oral interviews with veteran performers and observations of the current practices in the three locations. So a little bit about the historical background. Makyung has endeavored a love-hate relationship since its emergence in the 17th century. It was actually recognized by the Patani Kingdom and Kelantanese court that subsequently upgraded the performance of Makyung. So history has proven the Patani Kingdom was once the center of Malay culture in the region at the time, and so as the influence to the other areas such as the state of Kelantan and Terengganu. In fact, the Malay Kingdom of Langkasuka was actually far beyond the border of Malaysia and Thailand. And if you look at the border of Malay settlement and before the real, in terms of the geographical area of Malaysia and Thailand, until the Berne Treaty between the Siam and British to include the northern part of the Segantingkara and Patani was made in 1826. Then it's actually further endorsed by the Anglo-Siamese Treaty in 1909. And if you look at the map, you can see here that the Sempadan Melayu Siam, even the Sempadan Melayu Siam pertama is actually way back north to the Segantingkara. So this was actually to formalize the Anglo-Siamese Treaty in 1909 was actually to formalize the existing border of Thailand and Malaysia until today. So even though the ambassador of the British at the time, that Ralph Paget, insisted that actually Patani and Setol were actually supposedly under the protection of the British Empire, but it was declined by King Chulalongkorn. So we must remember there were no representatives of the Sultanate of Patani, and Malay, the Raja-Raja Melayu, the Malay sultans were present during this very, very important discussion. So this is what happened. So I'm not going to go into this historical what do you call it, by the whether it's a tragedy or whatsoever. So this actually the Anglo-Siemens Treaty in 1909. So this is actually a map just to show where the Patani is, as the border of Malaysia, North Malaysia, Patani. And also this also just to show you where the Riau is. For those who are not familiar where the Riau is, beneath Singapore is actually the Pulau Batam, Pulau Bintan, and the Tanjung Pinang. So in terms of the concept of the Makyung, the emphasis placed on the concepts and philosophy contained in Makyung performances displayed very strong influence of Islam, local narratives, and Malay customs, as well as palace's protocols when it was actually adopted by the court. In Kelantan, when Makyung became part of the protected art of the palace, its status was actually elevated, and all spiritual and physical aspects, including its Islamic philosophy, were standardized to match the quality and sophistication of a place art status. That's why you can see the difference between the performance of Makyung is actually the court performance. They're probably not as elaborate as the court performance. It will be quite different. So Kelantan at the time as an Islamic hub, or you call it as Serambi Mecca, was crucial to influence the essence of Islam in the Makyung performance in Malaysia. For instance, because of the most of the ulama at the time in Kelantan, the story of Raja Besar Mahagading is actually one of the repertoire in Makyung, was actually based on Surah Yusuf, verse 4 to 19. So we look also into the performance structure. Of course, Makyung will actually start with the Buku Panggung, or known as the opening ceremony, a series of elaborate rituals, followed by the Betabo, the prelude, and the entry piece. And then this is the fixed performance structure in the Makyung performance, where you will have the Mengadap Rebab, the main dance introduction of Makyung, followed by the section called Sedayu Makyung, whereby the Raja will actually bid farewell to his wife and also other ladies of the palace, whereby in this scene the Raja will bid his farewell and the wife will sing a song. And sometimes when there are performers who can sing, they also would actually sing during the session, followed by a session called a segment called Sedayung Pakyong. The Raja sets out to seek his companion. It's actually the Perantua. So the Raja will meet the Perantua and to get his opinion and whatnot. And then the Perantua will actually call the Peran Muda, and finally the Perantua and Peran Muda, they will come and visit the Raja. And then the final section of the performance structure is the Pecah Cerita, whereby from here you know what is the performance, because the Raja would actually tell you, my name is so you know the fact that my name is the Dewa Muda or the Raja Besar, so you know what's the story like. So the performance structure is actually fixed, all right, from the very beginning until the Pecah Cerita. So in terms of the Buku Panggung, when we actually watch the performance, even in Yala, it's almost similar though, even though the offerings was actually held at home, actually, not in the bangsal, in the area of the performance, where you can see here in the picture, whereby the Buku Panggung is actually a gesture of to it's like in the modern context, you must get a permit before you start a performance, so you must actually consider to get the permission, because of you need to do your offerings, because we don't want to have any ill feelings towards the all any to the spirits. surroundings the area. So you just give an offerings before the performance. So it's called this the Buku Panggung. When we actually went to Riau, we did not actually watch the Buku Panggung, maybe because of they have ready to perform, and at that time, and I'm sure based on our interview as well, they also have their own Buku Panggung, maybe sorry, not as elaborate as what we can actually normally see in Malaysia. But the Buku Panggung is the procedure before they start the performance of Makyung. So in Buku Panggung in Riau, almost similar to Makyung in Malaysia, and also in Patani. So the Ketua Panjat or the shaman will actually bless the instruments. And then the gendang penganak, they call it gendang penganak, gendang pengibu. They call it a slightly different name. Gongs and mong or tatawa, the geduk, the canang, the flute, and the rabab, the props, and the changai. The changai is actually the kuku panjang. It's actually the long fingernails, long fingers. It's a fake long fingernails. And the upacara buka tanah will start with Assalamualaikum, Waalaikumsalam, tabi orang di laut, tabi orang di darat, aku nak membubuh paras. Dan tanda di sini aku minta tanah yang baik. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Bam tanah jemalang tanah, aku tahu asal engkau mulai menjadi bintang timur. Berundulah engkau dari sini. Jangan engkau menghalang pekerjaan aku di sini. Hey! Something. I'm not the shaman. I'm not going to do that. But this is actually the upacara buka tanah. This is actually quite similar to also in Malaysia and Patani. Normally, it actually will be handled by the local bomo or the local guests. But if there is no person available, then they would actually do the upacara buka tanah. This is actually the let me share a little bit about the mengadap rebab in Riau. Slightly different, you can see. Whereby Okay, that there is actually you can see the different kind of the performance uh, uh, in Riau. I hope that you can. That this actually ada rebab in Patani. It's actually not much different from Malaysia. Uh, uh, in Patani, because in we can see from the dress of the Makyung is will be different, but in Patani would be slightly similar, except if you look at the headgear, it's actually slightly elaborate, slightly higher. And but in terms of the dance, it's not as elaborate as in what actually we can see in Malaysia. It's quite repetitive in terms of the performance of the menghadap rebab in Yala. So I'm not going deeper into that. This is the dance of cara menghadap rebab. The dance is not as elaborate as what we can actually see in compared to in Malaysia. Okay. This also performance of Makyung in Malayung, Selatan Thailand, Southern Thailand. It's kumpulan jenab. It's actually the source actually from Rosna Abdurrahman.
Saya nak buka. Tebaklah kamu. Bukalah pedangku. Oh. Ada fikir kami dah.
Dr. Hadi, some of the participants said that your volume of video not very clear. but in my laptop it's very clear. But I don't know, maybe you need to adjust a little bit the setting or what.
I don't know, it's actually very clear to me here.
Yeah, so never mind. For those participants, if you want to view it again, the video, maybe you can contact Dr. Hadi ya after this. Okay, Dr. Hadi, boleh continue?
Okay, sorry about that. So this is also part of the performance in Makyung Riau, where you can see in terms of Makyung Riau, they actually, the Peran actually wearing mask, whereby of course you can't see the performance actors in Malaysia wearing masks, whereby in performance in Riau, the performers are actually wearing mask. So you can see in the performance of Makyung Riau, they use a violin, whereby in Malaysia we hardly see the kind of the usage of violin, and the song is actually very Malay, with the asli kind of song, and also the dance of Inang also inside the performance. So I'm not going to go detail into that. So you can see here the difference in terms of the performance in Makyung in Riau is quite slightly different. According to the local practitioner Abang Mokhtar, he actually said that actually Makyung came from Patani. So from Riau, Makyung is actually believed to travel to the kingdom of Sedang, or the North Sumatra, in 1896 under the ruling of Sultan Sulaiman, according to Sumantri Sasro Suwondo. So in Riau, Makyung is believed to flourish in Tanah Merah, in Mantang Arang, in Rempang, in Dompak, in Kasu, and also in Pulau Buloh. I believe that up here, Dr. Purposive Subo and also Dr. Patricia Hartwig, I mean, they are more expert in Makyung Riau because they were there, and I think they probably can actually have more information about Makyung in Riau. At that time in Mantang Arang, it was actually organized by individuals such as Pak Hassan, Ni Doso, Tongkong, Botak, Ungumayang, Awang, Bego, and Khalid, whereas in Tanah Merah, it was managed by Mbak Tanah Merah. So in terms of the repertoire in Makyung Riau, they also have similar stories, but maybe in terms of the title of the performance would be different, whereby in Malaysia we call it as anak Raja Gondang, but they call it cerita Gondang, or as Raja Gondang. They also know a story of a Raja Bongsu Sakti, Dewa Muda, Dewa Indra Muda, Raja Muda Laling, Raja Tangkai Hati, Raja Dua Serupa, Raja Muda Lembik, Gading Bertimang, Timun Muda, Raja Bijaksana, Raja Bermasakti, and they also have their own local stories in terms of the stories actually not being heard or played in Malaysia, like Nenek Gajah dan Daru, also known as Nenek Dang Daru, or Cahaya Bulan, or Selindung Bulan, and also a story of Tuan Putri Ratna Emas, Putri Mayang Emas, Temenggung Erawangsa, and also a story of Wak Perambun, or Prak Setun, or Sepancung Daun, and also stories from Mahabharata, Ramayana, Panji Circles, and the stories from Pagaruyung also performed in the Makyung in Riau. So when we look at in terms of the repertoire in Malaysia, in southern Thailand, also Riau, they also know about the performance of Dewa Muda. It's actually quite familiar to them. Anak Raja Gondang is also familiar in southern Thailand. In Riau, they call it as Cerita Gondang or just Raja Gondang. It's the same story. And then Raja Tangkai Hati, Raja Dua Serupa, Dewa Indra Muda, Raja Muda Laling, Gading Bertimang, Raja Muda Lembik, Dewa Pecil, and so forth. And also, like I said before, in southern Thailand, they also have different stories like Dewa Vishnu, which actually also not very familiar in Malaysia, but actually perform in Thailand. The influence of the Thais. In Riau, they have stories like Megak Sakti, the Putri Mayang Emas, the Nenek Gajah, and Daru, and the Tuan Putri Ratna Emas. So they actually localize their own stories, stories from Indonesia. So there are also similarities and also a difference in terms of the repertoire of the performance. In terms of the songs in Riau, they have also the same song, Betabo, they have Betabik, Kedomba, and these are the names of the song. There are so many of them. There's lagu Bong Oi, lagu Memanggil Awang, the Awang Berjalan. It's probably the same, it's the same kind of the session is the same, but the name of the song is different. You know, lagu Hilang Royak Berita Nak Timbul, they call it lagu Siap Simpan Pakaian Badan, dan Jalan Masuk, lagu Bilang Berjalan, lagu Selendang Awang, lagu Cik Oi, Wak Onggoy, lagu Saridam, lagu Kelantan. There are so many of them. So these are the songs actually performed in Riau, based on the source of the Sumantri Sasusuwondo, and also in our informants, and also from our readings from the Butang Mas Warisan Budaya Melayu Kepulauan Riau. So these are the songs actually performed in Riau. And they also have the name of the dance. It's called, like for the Pak Yongs, actually they have it's called Menjunjung Sembah, and also tarian asyik, the tarian ulas sawa, tari pakai baju, they call it Memanggil Awang, the dance of Tanduk, the dance of Gedombak, dance menggulung tari, menyiram bunga, basuh tangan, sabuk, elak menginap. And for the Awang characters, they have the particular kind of dance where they call it Awang Mengojoy, Khabar Bilang, Selendang Awang. These only meant for the Awang's character. And also a typical dance for the other characters, like for instance for Kijang Mas Tanduk Kencana for the Kijang, and also for the dance for the Batak or the Jin, or call it a Chaka for the other characters. So they have a very specific dance for certain characters. And the finale of Makyung Riau is actually sometimes perform the song of lagu Cik Milik. So the lagu Cik Milik, so like sayang Cik Milik mengaram bunga, bunga di karang berduri-duri. Maafkan encik sekalian yang ada, permainan kami mohon berhenti. Normally in the finale of Makyung in Malaysia, we always have normally the performance of Makyung in Malaysia, at the end of the show, there will be a tarian ragam, you know, the dance of the Makyung at the end of the show. But in the finale of the Makyung, it's probably a slightly different. They probably have chosen probably a different song. They perform a lagu Cik Milik. So I know I'm running out of time, so I'll just go to the Makyung characters here. So we have here the Cik Saman Dosomi, and the Mek Munah is actually the Pakyung from Patani, and on the right is actually our Rosnan Abdul Rahman is actually from Malaysia. So you can see in terms of the headgears would be slightly different in terms of the headgear. And Riau, we can see also the headgear, the headdress is slightly different. We can see here the different. On the left is Mek Munah from Thailand, and in the middle is Kak Noma. It's actually she was actually 80 years old actually, the Pakyung in Riau. The headdress is slightly different, but it's unique for the local kind of the headdress, and also this on the right is our headdress, Pakyung headdress, and they also have the same thing. They have the lapik dada, and the baju. And this is actually the Raja. This is for the Pakyung characters. And the Peran, and I've not seen a Peran actually. For the very first time, I've seen a Peran in the southern Thailand, whereby they actually acted by a woman, a female, the Arwah Cik Som. I actually managed to watch Cik Som perform in Yala with as a Peran Muda with Cik Ali Cik Hama, also passed away in 2000 last year. I think both of them passed away. But the very first time that we can see the Peran actually acted as the female actually as a Peran, and she was actually very, very funny, and it's quite common to have in Thailand to have Peran as a female as a Peran. And according to her, Cik Som, apart from her, there was a performer also, Mina. It's called Mina, but there were not many of female performers actually perform as a Peran. But Cik Som was actually one of the most popular comedian for the character as a Peran. And the Peran in Riau, they're wearing a mask, whereby in Malaysia we do not have masks in terms of in performance of Makyung. So this is the Cik Som female Peran. I wrote an article about about Cik Som when we interview her. That's her on the left, and that's on the right, and she's actually as a Pakyung. Sorry, as a Peran. So she's as a Peran. She was so funny, and that's her trademark. So wearing a cap and then a long, in a big blouse, to be the Peran as a Peran Muda, and in the middle there you can see the Ali Chihama, the Peran Tua. So in terms of the Inang characters, I think this is actually quite elaborate. This is in Malaysia. This is the Inang, whereby in Yala, they wear whatever that they can wear as an Inang, as long as you don't actually portray as a king. As long as you wear the usual attire as a baju kurung, that would be enough. Whereby in Pulau Panjang in Riau, these are the Inangs, and one of the Inang wearing a mask. And also, in terms of training, there will be a different kind of training in Malaysia, of course. When it comes to in Malaysia, we are actually very fortunate, especially if in Istana Budaya, where we actually you have a different kind of training. You have a regular kind of performance, whereby in in the other countries, they actually sometimes perform because they know about the performance. They may rehearse sometimes only for a few times before the performance. But in Malaysia, we in Malaysia may have more time to rehearse before the performance. And this is actually costume and props. This is Malaysia, costume and props. And this is mask, which actually not seen in Malaysia. This mask topping in Makyung Riau that used in the performance of Makyung in Riau. So every mask have their own name. So actually the white mask actually known as the Nenek or the Datuk Betara Guru. Also the topping also known also Nenek Betara Siwu, Nenek Gergasi, the topping for the Awang Pengasuh, the Peran Hutan, the Peran Agung, the Peran Raya, the topping for even Inang Tua, the topping for the Inang Muda, the green one is actually the Wak Perambun, the topping for the Mamak, this is the characters of the Mamak or the Wak Dukun, and they have a topping for the Wak Petanda Raja or Wak Pakih Jening, it's in red color. And also a topping for the Raja Jin, the Jin Kaf or the Jin Kafri Ganga or the Tok Masing Batak Api. They have a specific mask. And also a topping called Pembatang, a topping Semang, topping Garuda, topping Beruk Putih. Or if you are if you are Kuda Kayu Sakti, you have a mask for that. The Kijang Bermasakti, a mask called Kuda Kayu Sakti or Kuda Hijau Pelana Kuning. So these are the names of the topping in Riau. So these are the props actually in Riau. They have a different, this belongs to the Peran. So in Riau, the Pakyung Sultan Berai is known as Bilai. And also I've seen even in Yala, Thailand, they use an axe, the parang kapak, and they also have arrow as a pana, and tongkat kayu, the wooden stick, even as the props, and the changai. Where you can see the Pakyung is actually using the changai, the kuku palsu, the fake nails, the long fake nails. It's called the changai. So that is the props. This is quite different compared to Malaysia. They have a gedomba for the performance of Makyung in Riau. And the instruments in Riau, they have rebab, they have gedok, they have a flute, they have a violin. They call it a biola bambu. And they have also a double-headed barrel drums. They call it a gendang pengibu. Gendang penganak is actually gendang ibu and gendang anak. And they also have a gedombak, and they have ketawak, or we all known as gong. Ketawak jantan, the ketawak betina, they call it. And they also have mong, the jantan betina, the inverted gongs, the breng-breng, and the cerek. These are the instruments found in Riau, a performance of Makyung in Riau. So, this is actually the present performance. You can see in some of the concept performance, how different is the Peran, how the Peran use the props, how they actually utilize the props, even though at that times they know they have the umbrella, because because it's all supposedly to be suggestive. So the Peran actually covered the Raja with his actually using his cloth as an umbrella, not as the realistic set as this one. So this is actually we can actually talk about which one is the proper presentation of the Makyung. So this actually to show how creative the Peran is, how he actually managed to make use of the props as the arrow, as the ruler, as an umbrella and whatnot, by using his own props. And the settings actually very abstract. This actually in Istana Budaya. In terms of the management and how they have groups, normally is actually different in Riau, and also in Kelantan is quite sorry, in Yala, southern Thailand. There are not many performers now perform in southern Thailand. They normally would actually invite performers from the other kampungs or the other village to actually perform. So they gather, and before, and they probably sometimes even rehearse just for one day, or sometimes just perform without any rehearsals, because they know about the performance. And different kind of how they actually monitor the performance and talents, and also different kind of payment. And some of them would get just not a lot of money, but as long as they can actually perform, they will be very, very happy. And in Malaysia, they probably have a different kind of payment. And of course, you know, in terms of the performance in the professional, when we perform in Istana Budaya, you get a certain amounts. So there will be a slightly different. And probably there is no contract to perform in the performance. So under the ruling of in Kelantan, under the ruling of Sultan Ismail, Sultan Muhammad, Sultan Muhammad, Long Ghaffar had actually had altered certain things and enhanced the convention of performance in terms of the concept, the techniques, the performance structure, the costume and props and management. And that's why we can see even the performance in Makyung in Kelantan can be the different style of the Makyung Kampung, and then the Makyung of the palace will be slightly different, and in terms of how they elaborate the dance will be slightly different. So it's actually from the court. I mean, if you actually train at the court, you probably have a different kind of choreography, but it's similar, but it's more elaborate. This is again just to show you guys about the Inang, the Makyung Riau, Pulau Panjang, Pulau Batam, Indonesia, that we went in Riau. This is Makyung Bulan Seri Bulan Tarian Yala that we actually managed to observe. And they also have the rebab player actually imported from Malaysia. Pak Ahmad Bunuhan was actually the rebab player, and there were actually not many young performer actually perform Makyung in Southern Thailand. It's quite sad at the same time, because there are not many younger generations actually interested to actually learn about the Makyung performance in Southern Thailand. So I know I'm running out of time. So how do we actually sustain and preserve it? It's actually it's a huge responsibility in terms of sustaining and preserving the art, depending highly on just individuals or the family or the group or the clan, and also institutions, NGO, and the government. And the issue is always all the cultural activities actually should be planned ahead, not by design, not by design, not by chance. We actually should not rely on individual or a group of people to sustain and preserve the art, because the collective effort should be encouraged and is considered as a national. So performers are partly sometimes to blame due to competitiveness, and the techniques or skills are only shared among relatives or close family. Sometimes they don't actually want to share with someone who are not familiar with the performance. For instance, on how to sing a song title like Lagu Sri Gunung or Lagu Cik Muda or Lagu Gunung Barat, there are not many actually know how to sing Lagu Cik Muda. So there are only 4 or 5 singers in Malaysia who actually could sing this particular song in terms of Lagu Cik Muda. And hopefully for the strategies, hopefully we supposed to establish the Arts Council. If we do have an Arts Council to monitor and ensure that the arts national agenda such as Makyung or other visual arts or heritage are systematically sustained and preserved, because we actually probably need the Arts Council, and all cultural activities are properly planned and organized annually. And and identify few talented performers, musician, artists to lead and innovate the performance. So it would not depend on personal or individual to uphold the performance. You know, once the person actually probably passed away or no longer involved, there you go. I mean, the performance of Makyung would not be performed anymore. And the budget and promotion through social media should be a priority in a government financial planning, so the performances would not be cancelled or ignored due to financial constraints. So there must be a plan whereby, you know, every year there must be at least one performance of Makyung. So the suggestion for preservation is actually to identify permanent or existing groups or even individuals and give some allocations on the instruments, to buy instruments, to buy the props, the costume, and an allocation for the training and rehearsals also. And I know I'm running out of time, so sorry, Dr. Siti Suhaili. This is the conclusion of the Tutup Panggung. Though Makyung has attained world recognition, societal recognition from the local scene is far from satisfactory. The ministry has managed to expose, actually share and created many activities to nurture and promote Makyung, but we need to relook and analyze whether the strategies are sufficient enough to preserve and sustain Makyung as a World Intangible Heritage. So a method of monitoring performance activities should be put in place by the ministry at the state level to ensure the sustainability of Makyung. So hopefully the ministry has made the right decision to withdraw incentives given to avoid, you know, to avoid misuse and manipulate the efforts or the initiatives of ministry. And the Art Council needs to be established, I think, to ensure the exposure at all levels, such as in kindergarten, you know, in the primary and secondary school levels, you know, the kind of the songs of, the lagu-lagu of Makyung should be actually introduced. Priority must be given to local folk songs, literature, movement, gestures, and dance should be actually introduced from the very beginning. Policy and planning for cultural activities should be designed and not by chance. Makyung, for instance, should be staged and exposed few times in a year, so the selected performers, musicians, and dancers will be mastered in their own categories. So this succession plan is actually very crucial to establish few or several performers who are trained and exposed to the art. And just to share, this is actually the published publication that we managed to publish, Prof. Patani and myself, published in the Scopus in SPAFA Journal, and also from also a newspaper. And these are the references for the comments. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I think I'm running out of time. I'm so sorry that I'm really ahead of, you know, tak cukup masa dia terlebih. Thank you so much.
It's okay. Normally the presenter, if they are excited, they will more than time that we're given. So it's a very notice that they also have a Makyung. And the good thing is in the Makyung, there has no indication of gender in terms of the performance. That is the good thing that I noticed. So we go for the Q&A. I noticed that I have a Q&A in the chat area. Assalamualaikum Dr. Hadi. That is from siapa kan? Dr. Hadi mungkin boleh baca dekat ruangan chat tu, from Shafii Falik. The question is dia tulis terlalu panjang.
Where's the question actually?
Okay, the question is, mana question dia ya? I would like to ask, how do you think the practice of other traditional performing arts such as menora and wayang kulit among the Makyung community members have to enrich Makyung in terms of its localizations? Have you seen similar trend in Makyung of Sumatra and Riau as well? Again, thank you for your presentation. Thank you, Shafii Falik. Ada dekat bahagian ruangan chat Dr. Hadi.
Oh, Shafiq Falik, yeah, hi, thank you, Falik. Shafiq, I know I also read your article. Thank you for your presentation. Finally, I would like to appreciate sekali. what's the question I would like to ask? How do you think the practice of other traditional forms of Asia Menara Makyung among the Makyung communities help to enrich Makyung in terms of its localization? Have you seen similar trend in Makyung of Sumatra? I have not actually, honestly, I've not seen the performance in Makyung in Sumatra. I would love to go to Sumatra. We know the fact that there is a Makyung in Medan. We would like to actually, I would want to go to and see the Makyung performance in Sumatra, but I've not had the chance to see the Makyung of Sumatra. But as you can see from the video in Riau, it's actually very Malay, but they use mas. They don't use a Kelantanese dialect. They use a Malay dialect in terms of the language. They don't use a Kelantanese dialect in terms of the performance. So yeah. And also in terms of even in the performance of the menorah and the influence of Thais, actually, where we actually watch the performance in Yala, there is a tarian lilit kacang, whereby the influence of the Thais is actually can be observed in the choreography of the performance. So that's how they actually localize the performance. So there is no right or wrong whether that is or that is not Makyung or not, because you actually localize the performance, so it's actually quite familiar to the local audience. So they actually enrich the performance of the local context. Yeah, I hope I actually can answer that.
Thank you, Shafii. Do we have any question from audience, from participants? If you want to question direct to Dr. Hadi, boleh silakan. Ada sesiapa?
May I ask a quick question? This is
Yeah.
Patricia Hardwick from Oopsie.
Hi, Pat.
Hi, Hardy. Thank you for your presentation. Just one brief comment. I think it's a little important. We want to say Capri instead of Riau because Kepulauan Riau was declared as an independent province in 2014.
Yeah, correct. Yes, at Capri, yeah. Yeah, we went to Capri.
Yeah. So there's actually, in terms of mainland Sumatra, as you mentioned, it's only in Medan. And I did interview, I wasn't able to see it either because it's not currently being performed. It was only, the last performance was, I believe, in 2011, but I did interview Tengku Mira Sinar, who is the Putri Bongsu of the Sultanate of Serdang. And she stated and this is coming out in a publication soon, but I saw that you interviewed Mokhtar there, and he mentioned that it went from Riau to Serdang. It's a little more complicated than that. At least the material that I got from Tengku Mira Sinar, she mentioned that Sultan Sulaiman actually went to Kedah and saw a troop, perhaps we think maybe from Perlis, and was given that troop as a gift in 1888, and that he actually brought it back with him. And then in the 60s, when they were looking to revitalize the form, her father, Tengku Lapman Sinar, actually did go to Capri to study there. So it's kind of that Serdang form is real interesting because we have sort of a peninsular Malay influence as well as a Kepulauan Riau influence. So I thought I would just kind of maybe mention that to you because the circulation of Makyung in the region is really, really interesting. And as you mentioned, also the people that I worked with, the oral history points to Patani. And some of the Kelantanese performers, I did a number of exchanges between Kelantan and Capri when I was there. They said that there were even some old Patani words that they heard in the Capri performances that maybe have dropped out of the Kelantanese performances. So there's a lot of kind of very specialized regional variations going on that bears more investigation, but it's very interesting. And I thank you for your presentation.
All right, thank you, Pat. Yeah, I would love to go to Medan and see the performance myself, but now we can't go anywhere. We have to stay at home.
Okay, any question from audience? since okay, Dr. Hadi, sebelum kita tunggu question from the audience. So during this pandemic COVID-19, how you think how they continue their performance of Makyung? Is it they have any initiative?
I don't think so. I don't think so that we are actually allowed to even to rehearse. I don't know what happens, what's going on to the even performers in Thailand now, because I mean as we all know that the pandemic is actually is hitting us very hard. We can't even rehearse. We are not supposed to gather. You probably will be fined by the police if you even rehearse. It's actually just too bad because we actually have enough some money to go again, but then because we are actually locked down, we can't go. We can't go to even go back to Riau and then go to Thailand. So it's actually very unfortunate. But at the same time, we actually was fortunate to go there before the COVID-19. So we managed to go there. We managed to go there to see the performance in Riau and to see the performance in Patani. And for the very first time, I saw Cik Som, Arwah Cik Som, as a female peran. I've not seen a female peran before. So this is actually very exciting, very refreshing to see a female peran to perform as a peran. So yeah, it's an ongoing process, but we hope that we can go there again. Hopefully, inshallah. Yeah.
So any question from the Facebook Live, Gavin, ataupun any question from the audience before we end this session?
So far
Okay,
there's no
okay.
question from
Okay,
Facebook Live.
we already put the CPD and CSD link in the chat area in the Webex, so you may click that link and fill up the form and submit to us. So Dr. Hadif, my very last question before we end this session. So Buku Panggung, kita banyak nampak pada performance traditional performance arts, especially dalam Jepang, dalam Makyung pun ada, dalam ulit mayang kan. So is it they have any macam derhaka kalau kita tak ikut that role, ataupun adakah apa insiden berlaku jika kita tak betul-betul follow di Buku Panggung?
No, it's actually the Buku Panggung is just a gesture of to just to make sure that there will be no ill feelings before you perform. It's like in a modern context you must get a permit. Let's say if you want to teach, you must actually get a permission from the dean to actually to teach for the for your class or something like that. And in terms of the performance, you would actually acknowledge the existence of the unseen. We don't want to have any problems when you actually perform the performance, because there may be some spirits around, because the place is probably not very familiar to you, and you actually are performing at someone else's place. So you need to have to to give some some offerings, and there is no ill intentions that you are going to perform. So it's just a gesture of giving some permission. It's essentially a gesture of permission to perform before you actually begin the performance. Yeah.
So if there have no questions, so we will need to end this session, our RF today, 28 May 2021. So thank you very much for all the participants.
All right. Thank you so much. Sorry. I'm actually exceed the 1 hour. 1 hour. I know that I'm rushing, but I was just actually sharing. I'm still learning about the performance of Makyung, and I'm still, the first time I learned about Makyung from 1989 and 1989. I'm still learning. I will have our Cik Mat here, and we are not here to actually to compare which one is the best one and whatsoever, because every Makyung performance, they actually have their own style. They localize their own performance in terms of the repertoire, in terms of the dance, in terms of because the local context, they have their own style in terms of the music as well, the singing style. In terms of when we actually watch the performance of Riau, they don't use a Kelantanese dialect. They use a the Riau dialect in terms of for the performance. So it's actually, but it's still Makyung. It's still considered as Makyung. So that is the most important thing. Yeah. But thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share the research, and of course it's going to be the ongoing process about Makyung and what. Yeah. Thank you so much. Sorry, can't hear you. It's breaking up.
Especially for the students and the staff, and we will meet again next month with the different presenter. So please don't forget to take the CSD and CPD the chat area and submit to us. Until we meet again next month, thank you very much, and see you. Assalamualaikum.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you so much. Bye bye. Thank you so much.